Good morning, folks, and here's an interesting post on the Washington Post about how The Last of Us Part 2 is compelling because it has a trans narrative. There's so much more to be done. No, there isn't. I mean, maybe to the story as a whole, but not to gaming. Like, who cares? Gaming is not going to be about sexual identity, nor should it ever be. That's silly. You can tell a story with it, but the character of Lev, and that's the only trans element in this story, is secondary and it's inconsequential. It has nothing to do with the narrative. It has nothing to do with the plot. It barely has anything to do with their character. The fact that they shaved their head and didn't want to go along with the rules of the community, meaning Lev had to, or Lily at the time would had to have married an elder for offspring purposes. That would be more than enough just to reject that, and you have the exact same plot events occur. Lily shaves her head, calls them Lev, say, hey, I don't want to do this. Tells her mom, hey, mom, I don't want to do this. Mom gets angry. They get into a violent confrontation, and Lev is forced to kill. That's it. The problem with the whole story is it happens off screen. It really doesn't matter that Lev is trans. And that's a good thing because it's neither good nor bad. It's a good thing that the element is in there for the sake of it. It's like, yeah, fine. Doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother the story. But that's also the problem. If you want to look at having elements to serve a purpose, it doesn't serve a purpose. Again, Lev could just have shaved their head, and that would have been enough conflict because the conflict all happens off screen. It's not relevant to Abby. Abby just wants to save Lev. That's all that Abby wants to do. Where Yara's like, no, no, no. Lev is going to die. My mom is crazy. She's going to kill Lev. And that's what ended up happening, whereas Lev has to protect himself and kill his mom. So this is just a silly article as is. Now, the person, Julie Muncy, is actual trans. So obviously it resonates with them better, which is great. I'm glad that the trans community is enjoying the character of Lev. But the fact that there's so much more to be done is kind of like, what more do you need? Do you want a story about sexuality? Okay. I mean, fine, if you want to tell that story. But that's not the point of video games. That's not the point of narratives unless it's like a romance. Or you're on a quest of sexual identity, which I guess could be told in video games, but it's not really the best narrative. So bravo, good luck. I mean, you got what you wanted, I guess. But it's not the focus of the story, it's not the focus of the narrative. It's all kind of silly. Lev's appearance in Last of Us Part 2 is one of the game's most interesting elements. Nah, not really. Young transgender man on the run from the community that refuses to accept him. He's the harbinger of significant tonal and narrative change. No, it's not. The tone and narrative of The Last of Us is pretty much the same as the first game, only it's darker. They've doubled down on the dark bleakness of the violence of the genre, which is unoriginal, but that's fine. You can tell these stories. But having a transgender character is not a big deal. Discovering Ellie is homosexual at the DLC from the first game wasn't that big a tonal change. Didn't change anything, really. Ellie is still Ellie. And then we find out Ellie likes Dana in the second game. Didn't change much. The tone was pretty much the same, bleak and sad. There's a little bit of brevity here and there. But other than that, no. Really not much change. From this moment on, Lev emerges as a major focal point of Abby's story and the player's attention. Definitely the player's attention, but not a focal point. At best, Lev's a plot point because they ran away. And Yara's like, oh, we got to go save Lev or my mom is going to kill her, which is very strange. If Yara knows their mother so well that they're going to kill Lev, how the hell does Lev not know that? And why does Lev want this acceptance from their mother so much when they've struggled so hard or so long? Very strange. So as a transgender player, this is the author, the inclusion of Lev is at first extremely surprising. Okay, fine, because they're not expected to seeing these characters and stories. That's fine. Naughty Dog went out of its way to conceal almost all the story in Last of Us Part 2 from players. That's true. Coming off that initial shock, trans players have been divided about Lev. Really? Okay. Again, I I don't care either way. They're a secondary character. Whoop-de-doo. Some of us loving him and some of us very, very dissatisfied with the way he's handled in the game. I'm pairing this person is very dissatisfied. I don't know. Lev goes through immense suffering, so does everyone else. He's dead mean by our enemies. That's right. They're called Lily. Now that makes perfect sense because in the community, they saw this person grow up. They're, I guess, 13 years old or 14, what have you. From the inception of zombie apocalypse has been 20 years, 20 plus years. So if they've known this person all their life, since a baby, they'd call them by their proper name. That makes perfect sense. And of course, in the trans community, this is called dead naming, and like, yeah, whatever. There's no inclusion of that's a cultural norm by the Seraphites. So, whoop-de-doo. His sister dies, and his mother tries to attack him. Yep, that's all very horrific stuff. Terrible, terrible things happen, but terrible, terrible things happen to Abby. She loses all her friends. She throws away her community that she was a part of because she wants to help some kids. And she doesn't have a plot that we can identify with that makes any sense. So I would say the problem with the narrative is not Lev. The problem with the narrative is Abby and what she wants and what she's trying to do. It takes place in a profoundly grim and violent world. Here we go. I did a search for fascism because this person loves this word. Much of the thematic subtext of the sequel story deals with the way various fascist ideologies rebuild themselves after the post-apocalypse. I'm sorry, you're wrong. You don't know what fascism is, and if you're talking about the genre of zombie horror or post-apocalyptic zombie horror, there's no fascism. I'm sorry. You have despotism and you have anarchy. Fascism did not come from despotism and anarchy. That's not how this works. Fascism in the sense of seeing the world as a cruel, violent place. I'm sorry, that's not what fascism is. You're wrong. Abby's WLF is good old-fashioned American militant fascism. It's militant. It's organized. It's not fascist. Where are you getting fascism? You could argue maybe the leader might be a little dictatorial. Maybe, but that's about it. Everything else is militaristic. That's not fascist. Lev's suffering makes sense as the inevitable consequence of the religious fascism. Again, religious fascism. What is religious fascism? Can someone tell me? We have Italian fascism. We have Germany-style fascism. What is religious fascism? Just say religious fundamentalist or religious extremist. Or theocratic or whatever, like something because it is a religion. This is a group which shuns, they're Luddites. They shun technology. So they use bows and arrows and make bridges out of nature, but they don't accept guns, even though when Lev does, and they don't accept flashlights except when Lev does, and gas masks or face masks except when Lev does. But of course he's ostracized, so he's not, part of that community anymore. And guns is like all these silly things. Like they use pickaxes and pieces of steel, but they can't make it. I guess they don't like smelting. I don't know. They accept some technology, but not all. And the story of The Last of Us is not, or Last of Us Part 2 is not about Lev. It's not about their sexual identity, so I don't know what the big deal is. So Lev speaks to me because in the quieter moments of the game, in the time you linger with him, he feels real. This could all be based off the presentation, not necessarily the narrative or the dialogue. I'm sorry, there's not that much dialogue. It's all slice of life crap. And if you like that, then great, you're going to love it. But it's all the presentation. If you take this out of the big voice acting and all the visual representation, the talking heads, all the cutscenes, and you put this like a dialogue box with a dialogue profile pic, you're not going to get the same impact, for sure. So just because it's a AAA title that a lot of attention was given to the presentation, I identify this character a lot. It's like, yeah, you would identify with any character a lot if you have a talking head. That's why people like the new BioWare games, because they're all these talking heads, of course, until Andromeda came out and then it screwed up royally. His personality is distinct. He's quiet and calm, yet entirely unyielding in his beliefs and his faith in himself. That's great. Fine. Deeply religious, except for the group he's a part of, even against the cruelty of the practitioner of his religion have enacted upon him, yada, yada, yada. I know people who think and behave the way he does, and I recognize a part of myself in him. Again, this is all good for someone reading into a secondary character that has almost no bearing on anything. So I'm happy this person likes the character, but that's not a good character in the story. Their sexual identity means nothing. It's all silly. It's all fluff. It has nothing to do with Lev's character. Lev could just have shaved their head and been just as ostracized. Fighting alongside and for Lev, I enjoyed the violence. I felt justified. So here we go. This person identifies with the character of Lev so much. They enjoyed killing. How dare you try and kill me for being trans? I'm going to kill you in retaliation. It felt good. That's what this person's reading, like a crazy person. Combined with the fact of the narrative of The Last of Us Part 2, which is completely violent anyway. Because that's the only story, the cycle of violence. Blah, blah, blah. And that's all you get of the game. I enjoyed the violence. Not a good sales pitch for liking trans characters in video games. Certainly not. But it's understandable that so many of my peers would disagree with you. Yeah, you're kind of creeping us out with you liking violence. Where I see validation in viewing Lev from Abby's perspective, critics like Waverly, who uses they, them, and she, her pronouns at Paste magazine, see one more instance of trans characters being created, as they put it, to make cis viewers feel good about themselves. Oh, so this person didn't like Lev because it's just a tokenism, which it essentially is, but it's not inherently good or bad. It's just there for the sake of it. And if you want to tell a story with that, then great. No one's going to care. Well, unless you take it personally like this author does. But actual other people are like, no, this is silly. This has nothing to do with being trans. He's like, yeah, you're right. Lev's suffering feels under that lens just like another example of what is often communicated about trans characters in media, that we exist only as buckets to carry around pain. Newsflash. Humanity exists as buckets to carry around pain. That's not a distinctive element of the trans community. I'm sorry, that's stupid. People all have pain. Grow up, get used to it. That what characters like Lev offer to predominantly cisgender audience, yeah, okay, I don't care. In my own experience, having bears out, again, we don't care. The real problem with any conversation about Lev and trans representation in games in general, which is that it's not a conversation that's allowed to happen on even ground. What does that even mean? What does even ground mean in a video game? Tell us why trans character in a video game is relevant, or in any narrative is relevant. I'm sure there are possible stories to have about being trans, identifying as this or that, being ostracized, finding love, yada yada. You can tell this story. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't care. But if you don't tell that story, then it's not relevant. And then if you bitch and moan about not having enough, I don't know, make a narrative fiction, interactive storytelling where your choices matter. Then I might care. Because telling a story about a character who's this or that gender or this or that sexuality doesn't really appeal to me. It doesn't really have anything to do with playing a game. Unless you're reading an interactive novel and it's just, dialogue on the screen. You're still reading. Even if Lev is a good, well-created character, it does nothing to change the fact that trans people are underrepresented. Again, they're underrepresented in reality. If they were 50% of the community, then, or of reality, that'd be a different story. We'd have way more. Of course we would. But there's no games with enough trans characters. It's like, yeah, so you telling me you can't identify with normal people? Are you that alienated? Do you hate yourself that much? Do you hate humanity that much? The only difference between normal character and trans characters are they're trans. In fact, that would give you better understanding if you can accept both the male and the female better than the average person. So why are you being so pissy about this? We are given virtually no opportunity in the mainstream of video games to tell our own stories. Okay. I don't see how that works with video games. Just write a goddamn book. If that's your story, tell your story. What is this big problem of using the medium of video games to tell a trans? I've never seen one. What is a good story? Does anyone know a good story of being trans in a video game? Show me. I'd love to see it. The history of trans representation in all media is one where we have been killed, persecuted, made to suffer in almost all mainstream stories told about us. Yeah, mostly I'd say in comical fashion. The overtly homosexual man, the butchy female. That sort of representation, I would imagine. And even when there is something in these stories that hooks us, that feels honest, it's inevitably told by people who are outsiders to our own experiences. So now this person's bitching that the person writing the story isn't trans, which is ridiculous. Yes, it helps to have people who live through something to tell the story about that something, but that doesn't stop someone from using their imagination and getting it right. Hey, here's an idea. Talk to trans people. What do you feel? Well, I feel victimized and ostracized. I don't feel in my own place. Wow, that's like everyone else. But it has a sexual slant. That's it. Boom. You can write a trans character. Bravo. Anyone can do that. The fact stands that The Last of Us Part 2 is created not without any trans voices at all. Lev's voice actor is a trans man. He didn't write the damn script. He wasn't the writer. I'm sorry. Didn't work that way. And trans developers were reportedly on the dev team. Again, they didn't write the damn script. They did some code. They drew some pictures. They modeled some models. That's it. Done. But still, through the leadership and overriding creative vision of non-trans creators. Yada, yada, yada. Representation. Wah, wah, wah. To be clear, I liked Lev's story. The character resonated with me, and I'll be thinking about him and Abby for a while. But without real empowerment and representation for trans people in media, there it is. It's all politics, people. You're not, why can't they do this more in this industry I'm not a part of? If you want to actually show compassion to marginalized communities, few compassion, here we go. This is the money. This is what it's all about. Few compassions resonate quite like letting us speak for ourselves and paying us to do it. Thank you, Julie Muncy, for revealing your true colors. You want money. That's what this is all about. Not about being trans and telling a story, but paying us for talking about ourselves. When that happens, games like Last of Us Part 2 won't feel like battlegrounds. What? Because there will be enough games about us developed by us to go around. Wow, it sounds like you want to be a game developer and write your own trans game. What's stopping you? Until then, stories like Lev's, even if they resonate with you, will only be a harbinger of how much better things could be. Oh, if you liked Lev, you're just virtue signaling. You don't actually really like trans people. Thanks, Julie. You heard some commenters had to say, slowly but surely, politics and political correctness is creeping into games too. Gaming is supposed to be an escape from reality to a world outside the world we're living in. So once this is taken away from us by emulating the real world into gaming, we've lost the innocence of the alternative gaming world that takes us away from everyday worries and concerns we're experiencing in real life. Please, can all gaming devs start to reconsider stopping this? Seems like a pretty honest response. I enjoyed playing the game. I did find it funny how much they catered to a certain crowd. It's like, yeah, no kidding. Tokenism. This game was awful and really mirrors Hollywood's attempt to constantly push far-left views. Just take a look at player reviews and you'll see that the majority of players feel the same way. I am glad the developers made their game. Let the market decide if people want to buy and support their future titles. Exactly. Completely natural response. Maybe a DLC where you play as Lev would help flesh him out a bit more. I agree. That would totally work. I saw Lev as the golden child of the story in the same way Ellie was the first game, but Ellie was corrupted by this world and what Joel had taken away from her, which was her choice. Lev still has the hope and is pretty much the only hope in the story, and hope needs to be protected at all costs. Maybe Lev can tell their own story in the future. That's a much clearer understanding of the narrative. Lev is much more of a child, very similar to Ellie in the first game. They're much more positive, and they're hopeful. They believe their mom can love them again and accept them, and boom, that gets torn asunder. So beautiful responses from just how one sentence, one paragraph completely undoes this person who just wants money. That's what it comes down to. Thanks, Julie Muncy. Thanks for revealing yourself and the trans narrative in The Last of Us Part 2. Bravo. Do it again. We'd love to read you. Thank you, Washington Post. And have yourself a great day, guys.